Hi, I'm Ashy, and today I'm going to attempt to paint this reference photo. So this photo was taken by my mother-in-law, and she's an amazing photographer, and I'm going to paint it on a card to maybe send to her. They're traveling right now, so or to have for when she comes back, and I'm going to have the kids write in it about how much we miss them and everything. But that's the goal for this painting. So I am going to use these Funto blank watercolor cards. Now these are 5x7. You can fold them either direction, portrait or landscape. So I'm going to do landscape. The one side's more textured, one side less textured. So I'm going to use the more textured side. They're cold press. They are definitely not 100% cotton. They're a nice weight. They're 300 GSM. So they're nice and heavy, and they warp a little bit, but not too bad. But the bleeds and stuff is a little funny because they aren't 100% cotton. So that's the only kind of thing that with these that we have to be aware of, is that the wet on wet is going to work a little bit different than if we were using a 100% cotton paper. So let's go ahead and flow right into it. I am going to use a squirrel hair brush. This is a size 4. This isn't a very large paper, obviously. So a size 4 is going to be plenty big for that. It holds tons of water, and I want to get in the bright background, and then I'll go in with a liner brush. So I have a Princeton Select #1 liner. It's not the thinnest fine liner, to be honest. So I'm going to use it, but it's something that I got to be aware of how much water is on it so that the lines stay nice and thin. But those are probably going to be the only 2 brushes that I use. We'll see. I might grab another brush at some point, but for now, that's the plan. And I'm going to go straight in. I'm not going to do a sketch or anything because there's nothing super complicated. The bridge is the most complicated part on this, and even that is not really complicated to draw in. So I'm just going to use some cadmium scarlet. It's a very orange color. It's a little bit on the red side, so I can add in some yellows as needed to tone that down. And then I'm going to use cobalt blue for my blue. So I'm going to get some of that in the well. And then I'm going to mix those to make my grays. So if I mix a little bit of cobalt and cadmium scarlet, it's going to make this kind of purpley gray color. And so I can add some more yellow in there if I want to tone it down even a little bit more, but I kind of like the purpley gray color. So that's kind of the colors that I'm going to use, but then the lemon yellow also, which is very dirty in here, but that's okay. And we're going to go ahead and start. So I need to wet up the page, and I'm going to try to keep the sun unpainted. Okay, so I'm going to add some clean water here to the page. And it can be over the whole thing, because if the orange bleeds down into the water, that's okay, because the water has a lot of the orange reflections in it anyway. So then if you kind of tilt the page and look at it at different angles, you can see where the water is. And so that's kind of a trick if you're having trouble seeing. Just shine some light on it or tilt the page. And then we're going to mark out a circle for the sun and paint around that with clean water. Now, I'm going to kind of lift up some of that extra water because I don't want puddles. And this is a mop brush squirrel hair, so it holds a lot of water. And then again, I'm just tilting the page so that I can see where the page is shiny, so I can see where my sun is. And then I'm just going to start tapping in the orange around the sun, and it should bleed up to where I put the water. Okay. There we go. And then I'm just going to add that color in. And then I'm going to add a little bit more yellow in up along the top. So I'm going to kind of blend those colors a little bit. And you see how that makes it a little bit more orange, less on the red side. Tap in to get some clouds. Okay, and then I'm going to use some of the gray that I mixed, so look at purpley gray, to tap in to create these darker areas. And so I'm adding a little bit more of the orange mixed with the gray to create those areas. And then there's kind of going to be a ring of yellow around it where the sun is shining on it. And I literally am just tapping with the edge of my brush and letting it bleed out. I'm going to take some more of the yellow, tap that along the edge to really bump up that light shining on it. Now this is really starting to dry, so I don't want to add too much water in here, or it will get a lot of cauliflowers. So I'm trying to keep my brush a little bit drier here as I add another layer of the orange. And I'm just kind of blending that up. And then I'm going to pull that color down the page so that it covers the water. Now I'm going to take my brush. It's pretty much dry. I'm wiping it on the towel and I'm going to lift some of that color out where the sun would be reflecting in the water. So it doesn't have to be completely white again, but I'm just kind of wiggling and lifting out that color. Okay. Zigzag along the edges so that it's not a perfect line. Here we go. And just touching in a little bit to create just a little bit of texture for some clouds. Okay. Now we're going to let that dry and then come back and add in our land and work on the water. The water we want to do while it's dry because I want a nice crisp line between sky and water. I don't want it to bleed up into the sky. So we do need to wait for it to dry completely before we start working on that. So now that this is dry, we can keep going. And I'm still going to use the squirrel hair brush, and I'm just going to make a brownish gray here. With cobalt and cadmium scarlet. Okay. And then we're going to use that to sketch in basically a hill over here. So there's a little bubble or water droplet on the end. So I just touched my towel to get rid of it. And then it's going to be kind of just below where the sun is. And then we're just going to put in that hill. And essentially color it in because it's a silhouette. So it's not going to have any detail in terms of color. Okay. Now we're going to take some cobalt. It's contaminated, so it's kind of a grayish color. And we're going to delineate where our waterline starts. And we're just going to go basically straight across. And then paint in the blue. And I'm taking off some of the paint and water as I come down and brushing across the page with the brush kind of laid flat toward the page to get a little bit of texture. Okay. And I'm just going to go across the whole thing like that. Okay. And then I'm going to add more blue at the top to make it darker, and more orange, and just let them mix on the page there. And again, it's going to create that kind of purpley color, like a brownish purple. Because the orange leans a little bit toward red. So it's just going to be a little bit purpley. And again, kind of pull that down the page. And it's going to have some nice variety because I've just been picking up the colors separately. So you're going to see variety there. Okay, and then I'm kind of getting a puddle over here on the side. So I'm going to move that out and add just a little bit more blue to the hill to darken it up a little bit. And there's very little water on my brush now. Okay. And then just kind of zigzag to create some texture. Pull some of those darkest values down into this front, but just dry brushing, so very little water on the brush. And then I want to do the same with orange. So I'm going to get some orange, dab off extra water, and then dry brush that across. To get some of that texture. Okay. Now we need to let that dry before I do want to darken the orange in the sky a little bit, but we need to let that dry. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I should try to do while we're letting that dry. I think I'm going to get a little bit of just yellow. Again, take off extra water and add a touch of yellow in to the water. Just to get a little bit more variety and a little bit more brightness. Okay. Just add some orange back here. Zigzag into the reflected area. There we go. Okay, so now to let it dry again. So this one it's not very complex and it doesn't take a long time to actually paint, but there is quite a bit of drying time going on here. You can use a heat tool to speed it up if you want. It does mess with some of the kind of natural movement of the paint on the page if you use a drying tool. So depending on what you're going for, if you're looking for that natural bleed out and blend, you wouldn't want to use a heat tool to dry it necessarily. Again, this being not cotton paper, it's not going to bleed out smoothly anyway, so it wouldn't make as much of a difference. And then sometimes when you dry it with heat, you'll see a little bit more warping. Okay, so you see after I did the heat, this is raised a little bit more. So it's just a little bit more warped, but that's okay. And now I'm going to go ahead and go in. Now I am going to change brushes because I don't want a lot of water. So I'm just going to use a Degato size 10 round. This is a synthetic brush. It doesn't hold as much water as a squirrel hair brush for sure. And I'm just going to get some of my cadmium scarlet. And I don't want to go crazy at first and make it way, way darker, but I definitely want it darker. So I added a little bit of water, took off the extra, and I'm going to paint just a circle around the sun first. And you can see that didn't add a ton of color. So I'm going to go in and do another layer. And then I'm going to paint that out from the line around the sun. Okay. And then I'm just letting the paint run out on my brush as I pull it away from the sun. It's going to create a little bit of texture. I kind of like that little bit of extra texture in the sky. And then I'm going to add just a little bit, kind of around, and try to get some clouds in here a little bit more defined. So just kind of bouncing the brush around with some of that brownish color over where I already had those clouds. And I'm just bouncing it. And that's just creating more texture. I already have some texture from where I let it bleed out. And then this is going to get a little bit more kind of hard edges in some areas. Get a little bit of yellow. And then I can blend some of that yellow in to get some variety as we move away from the sun, where it's the darkest orangish kind of red color. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Now I just, again, need to let it dry, and then I'll add in the sky, or the bridge, I mean. I'm just going to kind of straighten this line a little bit more. So again, just mixing the blue on and the orange, letting it mix on the page. Pull some of that down. Okay, I can actually go ahead and add in a boat here because this is dry down here still. So I'm going to mix my orange and my blue to create a brown. Okay. Take excess water off. And then I'm just going to kind of paint in a boat right along the edge of where the light is reflecting on the water. Okay. And I'm kind of doing the back of the boat here and then painting up to a point, and then we'll get the sail in. Add a little bit more blue, darken it some. And it's a silhouette, so we don't have to worry again about any like details here. Okay, so just tapping that in. And then I'm going to do a dot of bright orange where the sun is like peeking through and reflecting off of something on the boat. And pull some of that out, and so that it kind of has that reflecting look. Okay. And I'm just adding more paint to darken it more. and then take some of that off and zigzag away from it to create a reflection. I need a tad bit more water. Okay, there we go. Let's get a little reflection in. All right. And then do the same thing for a boat that's kind of farther back. So just kind of get in that shape. This one's going to be faded out more since it's farther back in the background, so it doesn't have to have as much contrast. With the water or the sky. I mean the water or just the water. I don't know why I'm saying or. Okay. And that one's a little bit smaller. And then maybe even one more. Kind of just touch in a little mast there. There we go. Okay, now we're going to do our bridge. So I'm going to take that same color and tap off extra water and then just do a line across. Okay, and I'm going to try to make it straight. And I'm going to skip over where the sun is for now. Okay. Just making it a little bit thicker now that I got that basic placement in. And then for across the sun, taking off even more paint and doing it super light so that it looks like there's reflection. And then we're just going to add some little areas where there's structural elements of the bridge. I don't really know what they are. We can add little dots on the bridge to look like cars. Okay. And I'm not being precise, I'm just literally kind of thinking, what is a car shape? And that's it. Now we're going to add in our verticals for the bridge. And so we have one over here that's coming like right down to the land. So I'm going to start again with a thin line. And then I'm going to thicken it up and make it kind of the shape that it needs to be to mimic the supports of this bridge. And then same with this side, nice and thin first. And then we add kind of a second line, make it thicker toward the bottom. And then at the top, there's actually like an opening here. So I'm gonna try to do that. Here we go. Okay. And then we have our cables. So I took a bunch of the water off the brush so that I can get nice thin lines, and I'm going to start at the bridge itself and then swoop up to the top and then swoop down this direction. That's not the right angle at all. So let me see if I can kind of erase that without messing up the whole sky. Okay, so I just added some water to kind of erase the line. I don't want to scrub too much because it's going to take out the sky. It did take out a little bit of the sky, but that's okay. Now I'm going to let that dry for a second before I go back and add that cable back in. And let's do this one here. So we're going to kind of come here and swoop up. And then the other side's going to kind of go to where this one is. So it's going to go through the sun. And again, I want that spot to be almost nothing. There we go. And these actually do have kind of two cables because it's on both sides of the bridge. So kind of add that in, try to make it a nice smooth motion. Okay. There we go. And then this one is going to come down and meet the hill there. And there's the second one. Okay, so there's our bridge. And I think that I'm pretty happy with that for the bridge. And I'm happy with this. Now I'm just going to kind of take a second and look at it, compare it to my reference photo. So I'm going to add a few more details in. So like on this part of the bridge, there's another little support thing. So I'm going to add that. And then these cables actually have some more cables coming down from them. So just using the tip of my brush and drawing those in. I'm not going to draw all of them. I'm just going to kind of get the hint of some verticals. And I'm going nice and fast, touching super light to the page. Okay, same thing over here. Just the hint of some verticals there. Okay. And that actually elevates it quite a bit. Now along the bottom of the bridge, there's some texture. So I'm just going to do dots with the very tip of my brush to mimic that kind of texture where sun's shining through it. I don't really know what the bottom of this bridge looks like, but there is, again, just a little bit of texture, like there's another line down here maybe, and there's like bars or something. Okay. Now I can darken some of that a little bit more. So just a little bit more paint, a little bit more water on the brush. To darken some of these areas. Okay. Same with the bridge itself, just darken it slightly. Okay. There we go. And there is our painting. So I'm just going to sign it. And then I'll get my kids to write in it for Grandma and Grandpa. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this painting. I think it really demonstrated how we can mix colors on the page and create those darks without adding any actual darks from our palette by just mixing our contrasting colors of orange and blue. And again, this is kind of a simple painting, but it also highlights the importance of drying time in watercolor. So kind of take those things away from this one and give it a try. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, it'd help. Subscribe to my channel for tons more content, both tutorials. I do real-time tutorials so that you can follow step by step, and also instructional type, educational type videos. So subscribe and check it out. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, keep those paints flowing.